Hey, folks, on Facebook. It's Alex coming from you once again from Castle Rock State Park, beautiful Santa Cruz Mountains of California. We will be getting into a little bit about the different ecosystems and wildlife here in the park. But first, wanted to talk to you a little bit about the situation going on. Of course, as you know, we are, most of us, in a shelter-in-place order here in California. And here in the parks, at least here in the Cruz District, we are closed. Most of our parks are closed. We had a few parks just opened up their trails to local traffic this morning. Fortunately, Castle Rock here, not one of them. So if you were hoping to be getting out here, sorry, you're gonna have to wait a little longer. We are still closed fully, even the trails, parking lot, bathrooms, everything. So I apologize for that. We are encouraging everybody as much as possible, anybody who can, that if you are getting out to recreate and exercise and everything, that you are doing that if at all possible in your home area, places where you can walk and bike. So we are definitely encouraging that here. We are still closed, and over at Big Basin, still closed. If you want more information about what is closed, what is open, and where, I would highly recommend following whichever park that you are nearest or enjoy or trying to get out to. Follow that on social media for updates. We've been trying to do a good job updating as we get information, as state policies change to adapt to this evolving situation. We've been trying to post them up on our Facebooks, Instagram. Some parks have other social media platforms as well, so I would start there. But I would also definitely, for a definitive statewide, up to the minute news, I would recommend going to our official parks website, www.parks.ca.gov/flatten the curve. We've got a website dedicated, a page on the website dedicated to, you can find things like a list of closures, statewide. So if you're in California, curious in that, I would highly recommend checking that out. Again, that's www.parks.ca.gov/flatten the curve, all one word, and you can get all kinds of up-to-date information there, and then that way I don't have to go into it too much here and bore you guys, because I suspect if you're watching this, you're maybe a little more interested in some of the natural beauty and splendor here. So we are going to get into that. So just again, I'm Alex, here for California State Parks in Santa Cruz District. I've worked here for a little over 5 years now. It doesn't seem like that long, but I've been what's called an interpreter. So I don't translate languages. I know that's where most people go to, but I actually I translate the language of the forest. I speak redwood and banana slug, and so my job is to take the cultural and natural history of our parks, distill them down into what's relevant and interesting to our visitors and to share with the public. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. Now, we are here at Castle Rock State Park. Who don't know about that park, we are located in Los Gatos, California. Technically, that is the closest town. They're actually down the hill, but that is part of our address. So if you're at home wanting to see exactly where we are, I would recommend, if you're able to, Google Maps or whatever service you use, type in Castle Rock State Park in Los Gatos, California. It should pop right up. There's tons of Castle Rocks across the world, but we are the only Castle Rock State Park here in California, so that should narrow it down. And you'll probably notice pretty close to Santa Cruz, pretty close to the beach, pretty close to the Bay Area. If you're not from here, you might have heard of the Bay Area. That usually refers to Cisco Bay, so a little bit north of here, San Jose up through San Francisco. As we are the next bay down in Monterey Bay here in Santa Cruz. So we do have our own, but we're not the Bay Area, although we're really close. We get lots of visitors from there, so we're a pretty popular park right between San Jose and Silicon Valley and Santa Cruz. So we are here in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and because we're between Silicon Valley and Santa Cruz, we often get referred to as the gateway to the Santa Cruz Mountains. So let me give you a little perspective on that so you know a little bit better where you are at. So I'm going to flip the camera around and give you a little taste of the view. Okay, so we are a little bit below the top of the ridgeline. Oh, look, turkey vulture. Oh, back. I'm sure we will see more of those. Castle Rock is a great place to watch TV, as they say. There you go. And I'm not talking about cable or boom. Turkey vulture there. So we're a little bit below the ridgeline, and we are near where the state park is into State Nature Reserve. And you can see the mountains going on to either side of me and actually wrapping around back to the coast. And so off in the distance on the other side there is Silicon Valley in the Bay Area. And there you go. So that gives you a little idea of where I'm at right now. Streaming. Okay. There we go. All right. And we'll take a couple other opportunities to look at some of the specific view and wildlife here. Now, I don't have to tell you that things change. A lot of us, we're going through a lot of big changes, hopefully mostly temporary right now. At Castle Rock State Park, change is just an everyday reality. It is, and I'm not just talking about the closures and the different updates and everything. I'm talking, of course, about the environment, wildlife, both plant and animal. It's in a constant state of change. You probably heard the old saying, the only constant is change. At Castle Rock, we see that so much in every little thing. We are coming at you here just a little bit further away, probably just about 2 miles or so west of previous live streams. But you might notice it looks completely different. The last couple live streams, I'd been near to Castle Rock, the Rock, and in more of the forest. You'll notice definitely not in the forest right now. We have a number of ecosystems here in the park that are always in a constant change. Largely natural, sometimes influenced by unnatural or man-made means, as we've discussed a little bit about climate change and logging already in the past. So we're going to be focusing on the ecosystems here in Castle Rock. Castle Rock is actually pretty amazing. We have 6 distinct ecosystems here in the park, and I'm going to talk a little bit about every one of them, and then a little bit about a 7th ecosystem that is endemic here to the Santa Cruz Mountains, although we don't really have it in the park here, but we'll get there, don't worry. So I'm actually standing in the Chaparral ecosystem. Oh, you guys hear that? I think that's a wren tit. One person told me once that its chirp sounds like a bouncing ball, right? When you drop a bouncy ball, it bounces and then bounces and it's slower and quicker every time. So the bird kind of I believe that's the wren tit. I would out maybe on like a Sibley guide or something. If in case I'm wrong, you can call me out in the comments section. That's always fun getting the ranger, right? So I'm standing here in what we refer to as the Chaparral ecosystem. And here in the Chaparral, it tends to be kind of hot and dry. You don't get chaparral in very many places in the world. In fact, in the whole world, you really only find chaparral environments, chaparral ecosystems, in a few little places. You find them here on the west coast of the United States. You find them in the southernmost part of South Africa, the Cape Town region. You find them in just on the western tip of Australia, and you find it in certain parts of the Mediterranean. And you'll notice all coastal kind of areas, either by the ocean or by the sea. And that really is what kind of, those climatic conditions is really what determines an ecosystem. So I might be getting ahead of myself a little bit. Maybe I should back up in case not everybody knows what an ecosystem. What is an ecosystem? So an ecosystem is an interconnected group of wildlife and its area, its environment. Okay, so you probably the food web, or maybe the food cycle, the food chain, right? Of how everything in an ecosystem is connected through what we might refer to as nutrient cycles or energy. Now, in this context, when you're talking about nutrients and energy, really you're talking about food. So the way that all of animals in an area are connected is through what we refer to as the food web. So maybe you've heard of the food chain. So let me break it down. Let's say you've got a deer, okay? And then that deer gets eaten by a mountain lion, as deer sometimes do. That mountain lion will then poop it out, right? Or we droppings or scat in the environmental science world. So that mountain lion is then going to drop that out as scat, that to deer. Then that scat might get broken down by maybe a banana slug coming by, getting the energy, breaking down, leaving the rest to decompose and fertilize the soil. Okay. Now the soil, just fancy word for dirt, is what plants grow in, right? Plants like a lot of the native grasses that we have around here. Maybe brome, for instance. What animal eats grass? Deer. That's right. Boom. I just food cycled you. Now, it's a perfect circle, right? Well, no, it's not really. And that's why we tend to not to refer to it as the food cycle or the food chain, which implies that the energy, the food is going in one direction, right? That's not at all how it goes. It is very interconnected. So while, you could have that perfect circle of deer, mountain lion, scat, banana slug, soil, grass, deer, at points, that energy might be going in different directions. So you might have that, so that after that lion eats that deer and poops it out, that scat could get broken up by any number of things. The banana slug is not the only. It could be beetles, or it could be bacteria of different kinds. Let's say it is a beetle. That beetle itself could eat that and get that energy from it, and then it could itself go and get eaten by an acorn woodpecker, for instance, like to eat flying bugs like that. Well, then the acorn woodpecker might itself get eaten by a bobcat or something, or it may be that energy to lay eggs and have more acorn woodpeckers that go and eat more beetles. But eventually, those woodpeckers are going to die. That energy is going to go back, decompose possibly into the soil, or get into all different decomposers and banana slugs, fungus. So the energy is connected through this food web, but it's not moving in a perfect circle. But it is what connects all of the different wildlife, plants and animals within an ecosystem. So here in the chaparral ecosystem, you are probably going to find a lot of plants and animals that are really adapted for typically a hotter, drier environment, especially in the summer. We are in a temperate part of California on the coast, so temperatures aren't going to get too crazy, although they can exceed, they do regularly exceed 100 degrees in the summer. You do get winters, okay, plenty of rain. In fact, we are in what is considered a temperate rainforest. We get 60 inches of rain here on average. It does make us technically a rainforest, but here in the Chaparral, of course, you're only going to find that rain really in the wintertime, and then you have conditions that cause the water to drain very quickly. We have what we refer to as high drain soil. So I'm going to flip this and give us a little bit of a peek of some of the nature here. And so you can see I am standing right now on a little sandstone rock boss formation. And if we look at some of the soil here, it's not exactly sand, but it is kind of sandy, stony, high drainage soil that will allow the water to really run off. So all of the animals and plants here need to be adapted to have, to be able to live in kind of water situation. Again, regular water, but often almost desert conditions. So a lot of the plants you'll find are going to have leaves that allow them to hold on to the water a little longer. This right here is the manzanita. I wanted to definitely make sure to show us some manzanita, because if you happen to check out our video from a couple weeks ago where we focused on the madrone tree, you might notice a lot of similarities, because they are very related. They're closely related. And essentially, the manzanita as the shrub version of the madrone as the tree version of the manzanita. Lots of similarities, probably the most striking of which is the or skin on the stems here. But you'll notice, of course, this is a shrub, and unlike the madrone tree, you'll notice the leaves much, much smaller. The madrone has these large kind of glossy leaves that the water can just drip right off of, so it can get to its roots where it prefers to get the water in. But the main hold on to the water a little longer, so a lot of times you'll see these little leaves in situations with plants like that. If you've got lots and lots of little leaves rather than a few big leaves, you create lots of little pockets, lots of little shady areas. Water can kind of collect and not evaporate right away. The manzanita here in the chaparral, whereas you tend to find the madrone trees a little further down the hill, in our case here in the Santa Cruz Mountains, in the mixed hardwood forest, mixed evergreen forest. Now this is just some of the plant life. We've got some chamise here. We can also in chaparral plants like toyon or holly. In fact, if you didn't know, that is actually where Hollywood, LA gets its Hollywood nickname, is from the chaparral areas nearby, and which are very common in Southern California area. That's where it gets its name. It's from the holly in the hills around LA in the chaparral areas. And it's also got kind of a curled, smaller, spiny leaves as well. In terms of animals, up here you are likely to find, and I say up here, and that's actually not 100% accurate. They don't have to be on ridges. They can be on more flat plains near coastal areas as well. One good example of this, the Channel Islands here on the coast of California, which are a national park. The Channel Islands actually are pretty low elevation. They're pretty small islands. They don't get more than, I believe, a few hundred feet, several hundred feet, and yet, largely covered in chaparral environment. So they don't have to be high up. And in fact, in the grand scheme of things, we're not at a very high altitude. I think we are just at about a couple. I think we're sub 1,000 feet. The highest point in the park is only about 3,800 feet. So gives you a little bit of idea. So they don't need to be high altitude areas, although ridge tops do make good a high drainage soil. Now, what kind of animals might you expect to find up here in the chaparral? Mountain lions, coyote, reptiles, lizards. We have multiple of snakes. In fact, probably in the chaparral, kind of in general, is probably where you're going to find, or where you'd be most likely to find a rattlesnake. Now, those are really, in the Santa Cruz Mountains, the only snakes you really have to worry about encountering. And of course, up here, there's lots of rocks to sun it on. That's where you tend to find, or I say tend to find, that's where the live. I grew up here. I've been hiking this park for my entire life. I've never seen a rattlesnake. that doesn't mean that you won't. So it's definitely something to know, to be aware of, to prepare for, if you are coming here for a visit in the future. But that said, yep, Chaparral area. So you're going to find things like mice that tend not to need a whole ton of water. And so the Chaparral is very beautiful, lots of vistas here. So I'd highly recommend our trails here at Castle Rock go through Chaparral areas. Now I'm gonna take the camera again. And show you a slightly different ecosystem, because I did say we have 6 in the park. Now, if you hill just a little bit. Now, actually, at the top of some of these ridge tops, we have an ecosystem called ridge top grasslands. We can't actually see any from here, but if you imagined, so these ridges here that you're seeing, if instead of, these are dominated mostly by grasses, popping off with all kinds of wildflowers in the spring, purple needle grass, that kind of thing. That creates what we call ridgetop grassland, which is a little distinct compared to the Chaparral here, where, again, mostly shrubbery, kind of, bushy plants and animals. Now, ecosystem we are looking at here is the mixed oak woodland, and in fact, what you're seeing here is probably the best stand of in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Black oaks are somewhat, rarer than certainly, our live oaks, coast oaks, canyon oaks that really kind of cover the, especially much of the oak woodlands up here in Castle Rock, or a little further down, in the forest, you get, tan oaks, that kind of thing. Black oaks definitely more rare. As far as I know, this is really the, we have all the Cruz Mountains, perhaps some on some private property that I don't know, but certainly in terms of public lands, this is really it here. So that's one of the great reasons. You might be able to see the Ridge Trail and Saratoga Gap Trails, 2 major trails here in the park, both from the black oak. And if you go visit Goat Rock, there's a great black oak, lots of shade right next to the rock. Coming down a little further down the mountain, you start to get into what we refer to as mixed hardwood forest or mixed evergreen forest. So while you're still getting, they're not really done. That's the mixed evergreen is where you tend to see more of the madrones, and you might start seeing some redwoods. Then, of course, the animals change a little bit somewhat since there's more shade. There tends to be, a little more, streams and water available, so you don't need things to be quite so adapted to those dry, at least summer conditions. You tend to get a little bit air, so you tend to get and a lot of times food means like bugs and plants and berries and that kind of thing, so you get a lot of grazers and stuff. A lot of the animals, they don't really stick to one area specifically. Like you can find mule deer in all of these ecosystems I'm discussing, for instance, and if you can find mule deer there, you can find the mountain lions, for instance, but find them or find their caves in chaparral areas. So the animals aren't necessarily like watching the borders, not to cross or anything. They're going where they need to go, but you do tend to find different plants them, and so mixed hardwood forest, you tend to get as you might think, quite a mix. Now if you look down a little further into the sea of green we got below us, that quickly turns into redwood forest. So while you might have some redwoods up here, they are not dominant. And so of course the redwoods provide a lot more shade, so it's a lot cooler. So the plants you get down there tend to be, you tend to get like less wildflowers in the redwood forest, for instance, less sun to go around. But with the increased shade, you often can get a little more water, so your streams might not dry up completely or as fast in the summer. You're going to find things like, that's where you're going to find your banana slugs down in the redwood forest. You are about birds because I want to get into I want to save that for a future video, but you can find things like the marbled murrelet, you know, the very endangered, lays its eggs in old growth redwood and Douglas fir. Redwood forests aren't as biodiverse. You know, they are rainforests, like I said, but they're not tropical rainforests, so they don't get as many animals, say tropical jungle, but still just teeming with wildlife down there. And then there is another ecosystem, so you can't see it from here, but if you can follow that general impression of the valley out to the ocean down there at Santa Cruz. That is generally the San Lorenzo River path. And so right along the river and some of these bigger creeks and streams like Waddell Creek down Big Basin, you get another environment called riparian forest. And that is, you know, right on the edge, right next to in the redwood forest. So the redwoods don't prefer to dominate the actual wet water, you know, areas. They like to be in areas that flood every 5 to 10 years, but not like right in the creek. And so you get trees like willows and alders. You tend to see a lot more aquatic or life, you know, frogs and turtles and salamanders and newts, that kind of thing. And so the riparian, and riparian's just fancy right on the side of the river, so you get that riparian forest going through. And then I promised a seventh ecosystem. It's the Santa Cruz sandhills. They get those a lot in Henry Cowell redwoods. I'd highly recommend checking out that park online for information about that. The animals you find there, really, you cannot find anywhere else except for mountains. The animals and plants there, you only find them in these tiny little sand hills, and they're so rare and location specific. They have very specific location names, like the Santa Cruz wallflower, Zyanti band-winged grasshopper, named after Mount Zyanti down in Felton, the Mount Herman June beetle, the Bonnie Doon or silverleaf manzanita. Now that's different from the manzanita I just showed you guys, a little bit lighter of leaf. But you'll notice the very specific place names. In the whole world, you can only find those species in the Santa Cruz Mountain Sandhills. We don't have those here. Notice here in the Chaparral, it's a little different. Sand soil's kind of, but it's not actual sand, so it's a little bit different. And and now I've just brought us full circle back here to the Chaparral, haven't I? I food circled you, ecosystem cycled, or I don't know. That's not important. What's important is that you learned something and you had fun. I'm going to be doing a game in a little bit, so if you're interested in joining, right here at 11:30. If anybody has any questions, to post them up in the comments. If I see any right now, I can answer them, and if not, I can check them out a little bit later and respond in the comments. But thanks everybody for joining us, and I just want you looking for updates on park closures or policies regarding the current situation. Check out our park Facebook page, Instagram, and definitely our statewide official parks website.